The business dinner was in full swing, and the partners had already discussed all the pressing questions regarding the paperwork and the business side of things. At one point, a woman dressed in business attire reached into her purse and pulled out a paper envelope, the contents of which were bothering her all night. The envelope was decorated with hearts and monograms. Camilla Watson turned it over in her hands for a second or two, and then, having mustered up the courage, she finally opened it. Just as she expected, inside was an invitation to Edward and Gloria's wedding. Scanning through the over-the-top text, which was actually written in the form of a poem, the young woman felt a prick of jealousy. No matter how hard she tried not to let it get to her, the situation was still very painful. Trying to get control over her emotions, Camilla decidedly crumbled up the envelope and set it on the edge of the table. "Is something wrong, Camilla? What was that in the envelope? You can tell me," Michael said, adjusting his tie. But the young woman only lowered her gaze and sighed in response. Camilla's mind went dizzy and took the woman back to a few months ago, when Edward was still her fiancé and there was only a few days left until their wedding. The truth was that Camilla never thought that Gloria could do something so awful. After all, she was Camilla's best friend since school years. The young women always shared their deepest secrets and in their hearts felt that they were real sisters. But when Camilla and Gloria graduated from high school, their personalities were getting more pronounced by the day, and it became clear that the two friends were actually very different. The calm and sensible Camilla channeled all her efforts towards her studies in college, which she got into her first try. But the wayward and cranky Gloria was the opposite. She didn't want to study and only dreamed of getting married to a wealthy businessman as soon as possible. Of course, the young woman had everything she needed to achieve this: good looks, charisma, and high standards for her life goals, which she would do anything to achieve. However, by an evil twist of fate, Camilla was the first one to get a boyfriend. By the time they met, Edward already had a job and was actually considered to be one of the most promising employees at his firm. There was a spark of attraction between Camilla and Edward right away, and they became a couple in record time. Soon after, the young couple rented a house on the edge of the city and moved in together. Watching sunrises and sunsets together, Camilla and Edward dreamed and made plans for the future. Unfortunately, her friend's happy life wasn't left unnoticed by Gloria. Camilla's happiness made her feel offended and deprived. She really didn't like the fact that Edward picked the simple Camilla, who didn't stand out from the crowd in any way. It was then that Gloria set her eyes on the man, who seemed like the best candidate for a husband to her. Of course, in order to achieve her goal, she needed to get rid of her competition, consisting of her longtime friend. But this wasn't as difficult as it had seemed initially. At first glance, Gloria started mentioning Camilla's bad qualities in the presence of her fiancé. She made a point to do it in a way that made it seem like her unpleasant comments were said by accident and weren't aimed at anyone in particular. Initially, Edward didn't pay any attention to Gloria's caustic remarks and saw the whole thing as a joke. However, when the young beauty began to pay special attention to him, the situation changed completely. Now, Edward looked at his fiancée completely differently. Thanks to the malicious things that Gloria said, he noticed that Camilla's personality and looks were full of flaws. Just as Gloria had planned, her action caused a fight between Camilla and Edward, which eventually resulted in their breakup. Unfortunately, it took Camilla too long to realize what an awful person her so-called friend was. Gloria didn't just seduce Edward, but also hammered a stake into the once strong relationship, which resulted in a fight between the two lovers and split them up for good. God, what did I ever do to deserve this? Do I not deserve to be happy? Thought Camilla with tears in her eye. Meanwhile, Gloria didn't seem the least bit worried about the consequences of her actions, but instead was enjoying all the attention she was getting from Edward. The woman was fully aware of the fact that Edward had a bright future ahead of him at the firm, where he was already holding a position as a senior manager. Meanwhile, Gloria didn't even stop to think what emotional damage she had caused her best friend. Not only that, Gloria had the audacity to send Camilla an invitation to their wedding, which was supposed to take place in 3 days. Michael Collins, who was the owner of the company Camila worked for, snapped her out of her torturous memories with his voice. "So, what's the cause of your worries, Camila? I know firsthand that at times like these, you shouldn't hold the pain in," the man said carefully. Camila looked at her boss with eyes full of unexpressed pain and sadness and sobbed quietly. The young woman had been through so much recently, she had no energy left to fight the negativity, which enveloped her entire life in an impenetrable sheet. At that moment, Camila really wanted to let it all out and share her problems. Michael Collins patiently listened to his employee, who he always treated with respect and fondness. Once Camila's sobbing began to subside, Michael came up with a reckless plan. "What if we attend your friend's wedding together? You could show your ex-fiancé that you're doing so well without getting laughed at. And I'll just have a good time," suggested Michael, smiling mysteriously. Michael's idea seemed so shocking to Camila at first that she immediately rejected his offer. But then, once her imagination painted a picture of her friend and ex-fiancé's shocked faces, she changed her mind and accepted Michael's offer. Camila knew that 5 years ago, the young businessman lost his wife in a terrible car accident, which instantly made him a widower. Meanwhile, the relationship between Michael and Camila was purely friendly and never went outside those boundaries. Thus, weighing all the pros and cons, the young woman agreed to the plan her boss suggested. Meanwhile, Camila had no idea that Gloria purposefully invited her friend to the wedding in order to make fun of her in front of everybody. "You'll see, there's no way she'll come. She'll get scared, like she always does, and will hide in her hole," said Edward, who was very amused by that thought. Gloria responded with a malicious laugh. She couldn't wait for the wedding day. Time flew by quickly as the couple worked on the wedding preparations. On the day of the wedding, Gloria and Edward's house was packed full of guests. The newlyweds were anxiously waiting for Camila to arrive, scanning over the guests from time to time. And when it seemed that she wouldn't come, a beautiful limo drove up to the house. The door opened and Camila and Michael emerged from it, holding hands. The young woman wore a beautiful dress with an open back, a ridiculously expensive diamond-studded necklace, and shoes with sky-high heels. Michael was dressed in a formal suit from a famous designer, which made it crystal clear that he was a member of the financial elite. Are they actually together? How is this even possible? What a gorgeous man. This simpleton has set me up again, thought Gloria, who lost the smile on her face immediately. Edward was going through the same emotions as he recognized Michael as one of the city's famous businessmen. At that moment, a thought struck his mind that he made the most fatal mistake of his life by choosing to marry Gloria. If it was so easy for Gloria to betray her best friend, she could just as easily do the exact same thing to me, thought Edward, shuddering. Meanwhile, Camila and Michael were pretending to be a couple as they came closer to congratulate the newlyweds on their wedding day. At that time, Gloria found herself feeling very uneasy under the sharp gaze of her friend, whose eyes were no longer full of sadness and misery. But as it turned out, this wasn't the most shocking news of the day. As Michael approached Edward, he quietly told him that he bought the controlling share in the company that Edward was currently working for. Not only that, but the businessman planned on making Camila Watson the manager of the new branch, as she had proved herself to be a great specialist in the field. White as a sheet, Edward lowered his gaze, afraid to look his ex-fiancée in the eyes. The newlyweds felt very awkward and were quiet for the remainder of the evening. Even though the guests were having fun and dancing, Edward and Gloria stood on the sidelines, each deep in their own thoughts. The groom thought about what a mistake he made, and the bride was jealous of her more fortunate friend, who had once again pulled out the winning ticket in life. Camila and Michael enjoyed the party, spun around to the sound of waltz, and enjoyed each other's company. It's hard to say at which point exactly it happened, but the two suddenly realized that they were actually attracted to each other. That evening marked the beginning of their relationship, full of passion and love. Having looked at Camila completely differently, Michael felt that this time Cupid's arrow had struck him right in his heart. What had started out as a joke grew into something much bigger. making the young people start dating officially. Attending someone else's wedding, Michael and Camila didn't even realize that they'd laid the foundation for their own future family, which would prove to be a lot stronger than Edward and Gloria's union. Ironically, the newlyweds split up half a year into their marriage. But Michael and Camila got married in a church and are still enjoying each other's company. Moreover, they're expecting a baby who will bring their tightly knit family even closer together.